Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about depth in the NBA and why it's important to the function of a team, and also why having a deep bench is important to a fan base, and also to the league in its entirety. I'm sure you've heard it said before that the league is built on stars. The way the NBA markets itself is through its star players. I was listening to Bill Simmons and Wosny Lambre talk the other day about who is a more recognizable star, Lamar Jackson or Jaylen Brown. This is gonna make sense, I promise. The answer to this question felt obvious to me. It's Lamar Jackson, right? He's been an MVP twice of America's favorite league. I'm an NBA fan, but the NFL is America's favorite league. But hey, maybe it's Brown, I really don't know. But the fact that that's even a question is a clear indicator to me that from a marketing standpoint, a team has more incentive to sign a star player who has more brand recognition than a player who might actually benefit their team and be a little bit cheaper. That would allow the team to sign another player that might give them a little more depth. And I think this is partially the fans' fault too. I feel like typically fan bases are always pining after some star player, and when they sign them, it ends up screwing over their team. That is if you believe the general managers listen to their fan base. But either way, I think good fan bases appreciate depth. I think it's a sign of a supportive fan base when you look out in the crowd and you see people wearing the sixth man's jersey. The best teams in the league right now are full teams, and the best fan bases support their teams in their entirety. So I'll be honest, I don't vibe with the Boston Celtics. I can't even really explain it. A lot of good dudes on that team, I just don't like watching them win. Still, I have to say, that team is deep, and the fan base knows their team. They know every player. And by proxy, I feel like NBA fans know their entire team. Like, why do I know so much about Luke Cornett? Why do I care if Peyton Pritchard is getting the start tonight? I think part of it is obviously because they're good. They get a lot of exposure. They've been in the finals 2 of the last 3 years. They're getting a lot of nationally broadcast games. But the reality is, they're just a well-assembled team. Jason Tatum is one of the best players in the league, and I guess he's probably the biggest star on the team. But a lot of people would make the case that Jaylen Brown is the better player. There's a case to be made for both guys. So even if one of them is out, they still have an excellent player on the court to carry the team. So that team has 2 top-tier number 1s, and the other players in that starting lineup are exceptional. Drew Holiday was an all-defensive player last year, and he's not too far removed from being an all-star. Derek White, another all-defensive player who shot 40% from 3. Al Horford, who's old, but is still an incredibly effective center. He's shot 3s at 40% the last 3 years. This lineup is so good, I don't even really need to bring up Kristaps Porzingis to prove my point. The Celtics are getting wins with Neemias Queta getting serious minutes. Personally, in my opinion, I think even if the Celtics did lose a guy in the finals last year, they still would have won. Guys like Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser got relatively low minutes, and I think the Mavs would have killed to have either of those guys on their bench. But one thing I do have to point out about this team is their depth is not cheap. Next year, they're going to be paying $226 million on their books, which will be the highest payroll in the NBA of all time. So it's possible that the Celtics' success isn't based on their depth, but more of a willingness to pay for that depth. So is it possible for a team to have too much depth? Maybe there's too many able-bodied, skilled players that they're not getting enough time. Some guys may be getting frustrated with their lack of minutes. I think the Rockets right now might be in a spot where they're a little too deep. There are a lot of good players on that team that aren't getting their shine. Reed Shepherd, who was the odds-on favorite to win Rookie of the Year, is only getting 12 minutes a game. That's not enough time for him to be Rookie of the Year. Cam Whitmore, a guy who had a pretty solid rookie season, is only getting 10 minutes a game, and he's only played 8 games. Jayshawn Tate has become an afterthought on that team after being a starter for a long time. Dude's only played 30 minutes this season. These guys are good NBA players and will get minutes on a lot of teams, or at least an opportunity. But the Rockets right now are just sort of keeping them as backup players in the event that one of their starters gets injured. Sometimes this surplus of talent can cause toxicity on the organization. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case in Houston though, but that is the reason you've been hearing that the Rockets are trying to pursue Kevin Durant. The Rockets have picks to trade, but they've also got solid depth. That's something that the Suns don't have. Durant is out right now and they're getting killed, and then Beal is out too. So the Suns are really having to dig deep into their bench, which they don't really have. Bol and Damian Lee are getting a lot of minutes. And since the Suns' best players are veterans, they need depth. But at the same time, they can't trade Kevin Durant because he's the only reason that they have the wins that they do. That's why I believe that the Suns are an example of a team that made a very ignorant mistake. Actually, 2 ignorant mistakes. The Suns were the best they've ever been in 2020-2021. They finished with the 3rd best record in the league, and they made the finals that year. Y'all remember. The Suns haven't done either of those things since. They've only been worse. The reason was because the Suns decided that depth wasn't important. I don't even know if they thought success was important. Matt Ishbia bought the team and then he dismantled it. Because he's a rich guy, he wanted to draw attention to his team and ultimately draw attention to himself. Now I know I am leaving out the Suns' failure in 2021-2022 when they embarrassingly lost to the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference semifinals. And I'm sure that influenced Ishbia to see his team as inadequate, which, okay, maybe that's true. But he goes and trades for Kevin Durant, one of the best players in the league, but it actually was a bad trade because there's no player in league history that's worth an infinite amount of resources. There's an appropriate price for every player, and you can't overpay or you'll suffer. The Suns gave up 4 unprotected unrestricted picks for KD. That's hurting their depth right now, and it's going to hurt their depth over the next 5 years. And not only that, they lost Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and Jay Crowder, all guys who were very important to that 2021 run. Then, of course, they traded Landry Shamet and Chris Paul for Bradley Beal with more picks, and the Beal-Durant trades would be forgivable if they were trading for players that weren't Beal and Durant. Maybe more guys who were more durable and maybe cheaper, less talented though, because if you're going to trade that much depth, you better be damn sure that you are trading for guys who can stay on the court. So let's talk about a few NBA teams that were able to accomplish the ultimate goal with their second unit players, the bench squad. Let's talk about the 2014 San Antonio Spurs, who defeated the last iteration of Miami's Big Three. They beat them in 5 games, by the way. Don't forget that. I feel like some people forget that. The Spurs had 9 players who played in all 5 games. Of course, the selfless Manu Ginobili, who spent most of his career coming off the bench, he was running the second unit. Danny Green knocking down 9 of 23s in the series. Patty Mills almost looking indistinguishable from Tony Parker on the court. And Boris Diaw playmaking, spacing the court, and getting points in the post. Boris Diaw actually had as many minutes as Tony Parker in that series. Another example of a bench that fulfilled their duties was the 2020 bubble Lakers. Not only the finals, but the playoffs entirely. Even Dwight Howard was an integral part of that team. If he wasn't there to slow down Jokic, I don't think the Lakers would have made it past the Nuggets. You had the last version of playoff Rondo coming off the bench, getting 26 minutes a game, averaging 6 assists, Markieff Morris shooting 40% from 3, and Caruso guarding all of the Heat's best 3-point shooters, and Danny Green again, doing his 3-and-D thing. Danny Green deserves a lot more respect as a glue guy. He's got 3 championships with 3 different teams, getting a lot of important minutes on all 3. But that's a guy who gets forgotten in the Kawhi Leonard-DeMar DeRozan trade. He was in it. I think people talk about the Moneyball Billy Bean effect in the NBA, but they don't actually talk about it in the context that Billy Bean applied it, which is assembling the basketball team itself. So we're seeing a lot of teams lately sacrificing depth for a superstar player. I think superstars are becoming way overvalued. Players like Rudy Gobert and Mikal Bridges cost teams 4 or 5, sometimes unprotected draft picks. Remember, Toronto only had to give up 1 first-round pick for Kawhi Leonard. The real harm in trading those draft picks too is those contracts are cheap contracts. They allow you to fill out a team without going too far over the luxury tax. Look at a team like OKC or the Orlando Magic. Most of their players are homegrown draft picks. The Thunder are 23rd in overall payroll, and the Magic are 27th. If they even would want to, they can trade for a player that they think can take them over the edge for a championship. Compare them to a team like the Milwaukee Bucks or the 76ers. You can say whatever you want about Damian Lillard's performance as a Milwaukee Buck, but it doesn't matter. His contract is ridiculously expensive, and it's put the Bucks over the second apron. That team is that team. They can't really make any adjustments. And you tell me, is that team good enough? And then the Sixers put all of their eggs in the Paul George basket, signing him to a 4-year max deal. And he's already been hurt twice, 14 games into a 328 game contract. That team's best players aren't healthy, and they have no depth whatsoever. They're counting on Gershon Yabusele and Kelly Oubre to take them into the playoffs. Dude, that's not happening. That is not gonna work. You need a large roster if you want to get into the postseason. You also need next man up in the playoffs when your starters inevitably get hurt. All right, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Leave a comment. I reply to every comment. Leave a suggestion. I reply to those too. I believe this was a suggestion. I'll go find out. And then like the video. Everyone's liked the videos. The channel's growing a lot, and I really am happy about that. So thank you for being a part of the community. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.